The Seahawks season has leveled out after a bad loss to the 49ers on Thursday dropped them to 3-3. So today, we're going to spend some time looking at the NFL season as a whole with one of the brightest minds in the game. Bomani Jones joins us to break down the 2024 season so far, and yes, give his thoughts on the direction of the Seahawks. Let's light him up.
I'm Jacson Bevins, and this is Cigar Thoughts.
Welcome back to the Cigar Lounge. I am Jacson Bevins, and along with my enigmatic producer, Mike Barwin, this is the Cigar Thoughts podcast. Mike, how are we doing?
We're doing, man. You know, I'm really thankful that I can at least rest assured that the vibes around the Seahawks are at an all-time high right now. Things are going really great for that organization. How are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm all sun-kissed. I was down in Phoenix for the weekend with my wife and a couple of friends. Had a chance to play a little golf, enjoy the weather, and thank God the Seahawks game got out of the way early in that weekend.
They really thought about you. That was really thoughtful.
It was very, very considerate. Yeah. So I was able to process that Thursday night after a hellish travel day, man. One of those ones. So where you end up spending all day at the airport. So anyway, flush that. But it's interesting, you know, the Seahawks, they're 3-3, and the law of recency applies so much. Like, yes, absolutely, their 3 wins came against what appear to be very bad teams, at least given the quarterback situations they had when Seattle played them. And now they've lost 3 games to a couple of good teams and honestly, probably another bad one. But if they had started out with those 3 losses and then beaten 3 bad teams, they'd have the same record. They'd be in the exact same situation and we'd be feeling different.
Oh yeah. It's a what have you done for me lately sort of league, especially when there are so few games to change your fortunes throughout the season. So you live and die by every win or loss, and the Seahawks have 3 of those consecutively. So first time coaching staff, first time head coach, first time offensive coordinator in the league. You know, the team has talent. I don't think that they have enough blue chip talent, as we've talked about ad nauseum, to truly compete in the NFC, but they have enough talent to be a playoff team, we think, right? A wild card team.
I think so.
If things break the right way, and this week against the Falcons is going to be really important in determining that future and which direction they're going to head.
Yeah, and you know, this is a game of adjustments. You see it all the time. Teams look amazing one week and terrible the next week, and it's just a reminder how small the gap between teams in the NFL really is, and how much styles make fights, and how much the health in a particular game affects it. You know, it is worth at least mentioning that the strength of the Seahawks during that win streak was their defensive line play. And they haven't had those dudes during this losing streak. So hopefully that's enough to kind of turn things around. But we're going to learn a lot about this coaching staff. As you said, this is real adversity. You know, you're given, when you're new, you're given a little bit of leash right off the bat to figure some things out. 3-game losing streaks are going to use up a lot, if not all of that leash. So now it's really time to see Mike McDonald and his boys put something together. And yeah, this game against Atlanta is going to be huge because Falcons are 4-2. That's a home game for them. Seattle wins that game. Vibes feel very different going into the Bills and the Rams than they would at 3-4. So really, really curious to see where that goes. And look, man, we're going to use today as an opportunity to talk ball about the league at large. And you know how excited I get to do this every once in a while. Love the Seahawks, love talking about them. We are going to do that today, but we're also going to get a chance to just be football fans and talk about the NFL. And we quite literally couldn't have a better guest to do that with than the one joining us today. But first, want to remind everyone listening that Cigar Thoughts is proud to be sponsored by Seattle Cigar Concierge and Glenfiddich Single Malt Scotch Whiskey, 2 companies whose products I enjoy on a regular basis. And look, y'all know by now, but we have teamed back up with Seattle Cigar Concierge for an exciting second release of the Cigar Thoughts cigars. The originals that came out they've done great. People really liked them. I'm telling you, man, the feedback that we're getting on these red zones is crazy. So if you like the darker cigars, stick with the originals. If you want something a little bit lighter with that same quality, get these red zones. You know, they're just like the originals. They have that robust taste profile, 13-year aged, premium Dominican tobacco leaf, but this has a Connecticut wrapper, which lightens up the profile a bunch. And, you know, they're still available for $149 for a bundle of 10. Again, that's about half MSRP for these same blend of cigars when they get sold on the open market. So my goal with these releases is to provide an avenue to high-end cigars without the high-end cost. And this partnership provides exactly that. And you can order those for yourself. They also make a great gift. You can do that at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. We got a link that'll take you right to it. Now, Mike and I love doing this show, and there are two ways that y'all listening and watching can help support it so that we can keep these episodes coming. One is by purchasing the cigars, which again, come at a phenomenal price for the quality. And the other is by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts, where you can watch full episodes as well as the funny and insightful clips that Mike puts together. Give a thumbs up to the stuff you like and let us know what you think in the comments. And of course, you can listen to us everywhere you get your podcasts. Now, this show provides us the opportunity to talk ball with some of the smartest people covering the NFL, and today is no exception. Visiting the Cigar Lounge is someone I've looked up to for a long time, and who is one of the sharpest minds in American sports journalism. You know him from his time with ESPN, HBO, and elsewhere, hosting and appearing on shows like Around the Horn, Highly Questionable, and Game Theory. He is currently the host of the brilliant podcast, The Right Time. He is Bomani Jones. Bomani, thank you for making the time.
I appreciate it. You know, when you get an intro like that, there's like rousing applause. Like, you know, like that was big time.
Hey man, I mean, I'm just reading your resume.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, you've been putting it together for a long time, and we really appreciate having you on. And, you know, like we were talking about a little bit before the show, this is technically a Seahawks-centric podcast, but we always do appreciate the opportunity to step back, look at the NFL as a whole. And I think 2024 is shaping up to be a pretty unique season. When you look at where we're at through 6 weeks, are there any trends emerging about this season that feel different to you?
I mean, aside from the fact that it doesn't feel like anybody's actually good. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, so I think it is safe to say that the Vikings are good, but that's good with a Sam Darnold shaped asterisk on it, right?
Lowercase g.
Yeah. Like, I think it's safe to say that the Ravens are good. I think it's safe to say the Texans are good. It should feel safe to say that the Chiefs are good, except the only thing good about them is that they're 5-0, at least from what I've seen with my own eyeballs. Like, nothing else actually looks to be good in watching them. Like, this feels like chaos season. That's the only trend I've got, is I feel very confident saying I don't really know how this is going to go.
And that's the thing, is like the league has been chasing parity for so long. And, you know, I think one of the under discussed aspects about parity is if you have a really well run franchise, it actually makes dynasties easier when you have a league that's trying to drag everybody back to the middle. And we've seen that, right? The number of Super Bowls that have been won over the last 30 years, there ain't that many teams who have actually done it. And so when you end up with a situation like this, it's like, this is the first time where it truly does feel like everyone is dragged back to the middle. Like, the Vikings are undefeated and the 49ers are 500, but you put them on a neutral field, most people, including myself, are going to bet the 49ers to win that game still. And I'll be so curious to see how these things from the first month and a half kind of shake out. There is one trend, though. I want to run it by you. It's kind of a working theory that I haven't heard talked about a lot, but it feels like injuries over the last few years continue to be a bigger and bigger part of the game. And it could simply be that players are just bigger and faster, and there's more, you know, muscles grow faster than tendons. And so as these guys get bigger, there's greater stress put on ligaments and things like that. I wonder, though, how much of this is an unintended consequence of these player safety measures, not letting guys hit in practice, not letting them practice as much. All of these penalties that are designed to protect players last night we're watching a game with 20 some penalties in it. Well, that's 20 some extra plays that are getting run in that game. Maybe 10 of those calls didn't need to be made. That's 10 more plays that are getting run. Is it possible that with this new CBA and everything designed to keep players safe, it is accidentally creating a more hazardous situation for them, or am I way off base?
Well, I think that that's a hypothesis that's worth exploring. I don't know what happens when you get to the end of it, but we have to acknowledge that the weirdo thing about this game is that it's so unsafe that you can't practice it. Mm-hmm. Like this is the game where it's only okay to play it if we're all getting paid. If we're just out here fucking around, we should probably not do it because this is a silly game to play, right? Yep. Now, in basketball, where I think people have similar questions about this preponderance of injury that seems to be greater now than it had been in the past, my hypothesis there leans toward overuse, which is they play a lot more basketball as children and going at every step of the way that they're doing this more and more and more. And so by the time they get to the league, they've actually got more miles on them than they had previously. Now, I think with football, there is a certain mileage effect, but it's not going to be like the getting knocked around as much as playing all the 7-on-7 and those sorts of things. Like how that correlates to the kind of injuries we're talking about, I think it becomes a fair question. But in the end, I think it's probably a combination of some things. I think it's possible that some of the safety measures kind of prevent this forming of calluses, basically, like the idea that there's some hardening that goes on along the way. I think there could be something to that. It could also be what you said before, man. These dudes are really, really, really big. And not just really big, but really big and wearing a lot more equipment than they used to, which is to say a lot more things to protect you as you go to wreak havoc, even though they've done a lot to try to minimize the amount of havoc that could be wreaked. I remember when Steve Atwater went into the Hall of Fame, I was like, so how are they going to show his video? He got into the Hall of Fame for doing a bunch of stuff that you can't do anymore. Are you even allowed to put that stuff on TV? And we don't have that anymore.
Yeah, I mean, and I wonder when you're the NFL and you're the Players Association, you're trying to find a way forward. Do we just keep seeing more and more points of emphasis every year from the officials? Do we keep seeing fewer and fewer practices, fewer and fewer reps in preseason? Because I think that's another thing that, football was kind of ugly the first month of the season. And it's been that way the last 3 years. And it's almost like NFL teams with their starters are treating September like the preseason. And it's only in the last couple of weeks, and this happened last year too, where we're really starting to see offenses gel and feel like there's some timing and some rhythm. If you were an NFL coach, would you lean towards playing your starters more in preseason, or are you just not risking that injury?
It's so interesting because I think, again, that gets to what we were talking about before. This game is so silly that you can't play it. I would think that at some point somebody's going to be the one to be like, no, we're going to play some starters because we got to get some crispness in as to what we're doing. Now, the question becomes, how much crispness do you actually need? Does 2 drives a week really get you to the place that you need to be? Don't have the greatest answer to that. But I think somebody's going to figure out that we can get somewhere by getting ahead and figuring out how exactly it is that you wind up getting ahead. But they're going to have to get something because you're right. First month of football is rough, man. It's not great. And it's reached a point where you used to kind of reasonably know, a team like Cincinnati, for example, if you start off 1-4, you're donezo. No, they themselves have done this a couple of times where they've had these crazy slow starts and then come to put it together. I don't know what to make of a team and what they do in the first month of the year. It used to matter a little bit more or have greater consequence when we got to answering questions about what kind of teams we were talking about.
Yeah, and keeping it on that track, I do want to do a little contender, pretender with you. And all the teams that I'm about to read off to you have winning records right now. You tell me if you think they legitimately have a chance to win a playoff game this year or not. And, in a non-fluky way, I'm not talking about the Giants a couple years ago, like a team that feels like they could beat a playoff team. And then if there's any of these teams you want to talk about a little bit, go right ahead. But you mentioned them. You said that you're pretty sure they're good. We'll start at the top with the Vikings.
Got to go contender just because that defense looks to be so good. And Brian Flores, who I think is about to be in a very interesting place in his life of super duper highly paid defensive coordinator that's never going to be a head coach again because LOL, that's not going to happen. But he appears to be a monster, and he appears to be of this Belichick school of I can cook up anything and throw it at you and you don't have any idea what to do with it. I think that'll go a long way. They definitely can win a playoff game. It's really just coming down to like, how far do you think this Sam Darnold thing can really go? Because what hasn't changed about him, I've watched a decent bit of them through this year. He's still prone to panic. Mm-hmm. Now, you can get a guy like Josh Allen who has improved greatly, but is still prone to panic. Like, you still see those moments where you're like, dude, what in the world are you doing? He's a different caliber of player than Sam Darnold. So, like, I don't think that you can win 3 or 4 playoff games with Sam Darnold and win a Super Bowl. I just don't think you can string enough of those together. Sure. Can you win 1, maybe 2? Yes. Yes, you can. I've seen Jimmy Garoppolo play at a Super Bowl.
Yeah, totally. And the thing is, like, I am happy to see them off to a good start when so many people were writing them off, myself included, coming into this year. I'm looking at the rest of that division and the way they're trending, and I'm thinking, there's no way the Vikings are in the mix, much less top of the heap. I just want to give Kevin O'Connell some flowers because I've been so impressed with him since he came over from the Rams. And this combined with Brian Flores, who, yeah, to your point, I mean, different route to it, but feels like he could be the next Steve Spagnuolo, where he's just going to be a great defensive coordinator year in and year out. It's just cool to see Kevin O'Connell really shine because I think a lot of people attributed a lot of their wins to the talent on the roster, and we're seeing him do it without. So, yeah, I'm with you. I think they're definitely a team that can win a playoff game or two. Next one, the Commanders.
So, I hadn't even really come up with what I was going to say after I said the so. On the plus side, Jaden Daniels looks to be legit. I feel confident enough saying that. I also feel like, and this is more anecdotal, I haven't bothered to look up the particulars on this, but I feel like I've watched these Cliff Kingsbury offenses start hot and then everybody start catching up, and he's not the greatest.
That was going to be the next thing I asked you. Yeah.
That's my concern. The other thing is, it's not as though the Commandos haven't had players over the course of time, but one of the players they've had was John Allen, and now he's out for the year with a pec injury, and I think that matters a lot because a big part of what they're doing on defense is, if you actually look at what their defense looks like, they weren't trying that hard on the scouting. And I'm not saying that they were being lazy as much as they were making their lives easy. You went to Ohio State? Yeah, give it a try. Alabama? Yeah, that's what's up. And so they had these 2 defensive tackles from Alabama with Payne and Allen, and now they only got one of them. Yeah. And so I feel bad for him because Allen is clearly one of those guys who cared a lot when they were bums, and now they look like not bums, and then you see what happens. But I think they'll probably win that division because somebody has to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they got some juice too. You know, I've always kind of liked Dan Quinn. He feels like Kirkland's signature Dan Campbell. And he's just got like that same kind of vibe to him. Whereas I feel like with Dan Campbell, if the Lions lost 3 games in a row, like I have a ton of confidence in that locker room. I'm not sure I'm there with Dan Quinn, but it's cool to see him in that locker room because of the way that he leads. He leads with enthusiasm. I've always appreciated coaches that do that. It'll be curious because their losing streak is coming. They're not good enough to just go all season winning 3 out of every 4 games. So I'll be really, really interested to see how that happens. And frankly, what happens once there's 2-3 months of Jaden Daniels tape out there for defensive coordinators. But they've been a really, really fun story. And I got to imagine that fan base is feeling as optimistic as they have in a couple of decades.
I just want to point out that Dan Quinn went to the Super Bowl with the Atlanta Falcons. And you could talk about the fact that they blew the lead. That's fine. That man went to a Super Bowl with the Atlanta Falcons. Like, I don't know why people think any old body can do that. I'm here to tell you, no, any old body cannot do that. He is someone who has managed to pull this off. I believe that he is a good coach, and they've turned a lot over, obviously, with their franchise where they got ding dong the witch is dead kind of situation there. And, they got a whole new life. Amen. They still got the laziest, ugliest uniforms that I could think of. Like, I don't know if they're so much ugly as much as it looked like ain't nobody really try
That's just
right? Like
MS Paint,
everything
man.
about
That's
them look
Microsoft Paint.
Man, everything they got looked like a placeholder. Like, remember when they had a placeholder name, and these were kind of the uniforms that they broke out? Like, they just got a lot of placeholder situations.
I actually kind of like the placeholder name.
I did.
I thought football team was hot.
Well, it was better than Commando. Like, the thing about, and I think they're going to ultimately change this name because they want to wipe the Snyder off of everywhere. Mm-hmm. But when they got the name away from the slur and their statement was, we're going to come up with something that honors our military, when the hell did that become a requirement for the name of this team? Like, Snyder was always trying to stay one step ahead of the cavalry at every turn, and his move always was, well, we're going to salute our heroes. Let me tell you something, man. If our heroes were anything like y'all, we'd all be speaking British. You know what I'm saying? Like, nothing about what y'all was doing seemed to be in line with the heroes.
Yeah, I hear you there. Okay, so flip side, because Commandos, you see how you got me calling them that.
It just flows so easy.
It does. I like it better. I'm adopting it. On the flip side, you've got a very known quantity, it feels like, certainly from a coaching and organizational standpoint, but I swear to you, man, Mike Tomlin is just the NFL's Rasputin. The Steelers are 4-2, and they were supposed to be bad. Finally supposed to be a losing season under Mike Tomlin. I think it's one of the most under-discussed accomplishments in recent NFL history is that Mike Tomlin hasn't had a losing season. Well, he might not do it again. Steelers 4-2. They real?
I mean, they are really going to finish over 500.
Crazy.
I know that much. I'm still trying to figure out if I think Justin Fields is good. And I don't have a great answer to that one right now. He is certainly better than he had been, but I am not sure exactly how good he is. I'm just going to throw it out here, though, that the last time that the Steelers won a playoff game, the president was black.
Yeah. Well, and
it's been a minute.
We went through the same thing here in Seattle, right? Where is, you have Pete Carroll, who had that incredible 6-7 year run to start his time in Seattle and won a lot of playoff games, and then didn't win any playoff games for a long time, but they won 9 games or 10 games every year. And it created this tension among the fan base where it's like, yeah, it could be a lot worse. Be grateful for what you have. The fact that they're winning more games than they're losing every year versus, well, sure, that's fine to have the high floor, but there is no ceiling right now. Like 9-10 might be the worst that you can expect, but it might be the best that you can expect also. And they are not equipped to win a playoff game. If you're a Steelers fan, at what point are you saying, you know what, I'm willing to risk the floor that I know we have with Tomlin to take a swing on something that's maybe aiming a little bit higher?
Well, I mean, from what I've been hearing from Steelers fans on the internet, they've been there for about 4 or 5 years. Now, what I can't tell is how many of them are actual people. Right? Or how many, like just where they're just firing stuff off. I think the question to ask, though, about the Steelers is when are they going to be a bit more proactive about fixing their quarterback situation, which to me is probably more reflective of what the situation has been than anything else. Roethlisberger, I think I'm looking at the numbers in front of me now, like 2018 feels like the last time that Roethlisberger was really giving you something. And I don't even know how good he was in the course of that as much as he was giving you something, like a bunch of touchdowns, bunch of interceptions, 5,000 yards. But what's that mean? They threw the ball a zillion times. I don't think they have a quarterback yet that makes them a legitimate contender. And until they fix that part, I don't know how exactly you're supposed to evaluate Tomlin, but I don't feel like these last couple of teams truly had talent. Like, I think they overachieved to win as many games as they did in the course of the last couple of years.
Yeah, and the style of football that they've been playing for the last number of years, because historically Steelers run game and defense, and then they got real high flying for a while, and they won a Super Bowl chucking it all over the field, and it's like now they're back to it. And one, I think that he won't get it, but I would probably give my vote if I had to right now for MVP to TJ Watt. I think that he is making a bigger impact on the games he plays in than anybody else in the NFL right now. And I think that you have, for all of the frustrations that football fans have and fantasy football fans have with Arthur Smith, I do think that he is an ideal coordinator for protecting a limited quarterback. I think that he can run the type of offense that puts a quarterback like Justin Fields, who has obvious strengths and obvious limitations, in the best position to succeed. But I think in the modern NFL, if you're going to really make a run, You have to be able to be down 17 and feel like you still have a chance to come back and win. And the Steelers don't feel like they have that in their bag.
See, I like Arthur. I'm here to run the ball. Like anybody who wakes up in the morning and says, we are going to beat the hell out of them and we're going to run the ball. That's my type of party. Like this Derrick Henry thing, make it last forever,
my gosh,
right?
Man. Yeah.
We are here to run the ball on people. And you're right. Arthur's going to put you in a play action situation where we're going to run the ball, and then we're going to make things easier for you, because why wouldn't I want to make things easier for you, even if you're not limited? I do think the situation is somewhat ideal in that sense. But they're also playing in what right now appears to be a mediocre conference. Like, I'm not sure I'm in a position to say anybody can't do anything.
Yeah. Well, are you ready to tell me this guy can't do anything? Where are you at with Baker Mayfield and the Bucs right now?
I don't know what to do with him, because I was certain that he wasn't good, right? Like, I think and it wasn't like we hadn't given him time,
no,
right? Yeah. Like I thought, like, this isn't, he's not in a bag where Geno Smith was, where we truly did not give him time, right? He had 2 years with a bad team, and then somebody broke his face and we tried to make it his fault.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden you looked up, and after he got to sit the pine for 6 or 7 years, you realized he was actually good. I did not think that Baker had it. It seems that he is at the very least good, right? And being a good quarterback, I think that's a stronger statement than it gets credit for being. To be a good quarterback. It's not that easy being a good quarterback. He's doing it. And look, Ty Bowles, put him also on the list of people who have improved. Yep. Because he was not a good coach when he was with the Jets. I don't think there's any equity. You could say that the Jets were the Jets. He was part of the problem. Like, part of the problem was the Jets had coaches like Ty Bowles when he was there. No, he looks like he's good now. Like, they have brought some things around with that. And they're in that division where, like, it's another somebody's got to win it division. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling that you're going to ask me about this other team there, and I will say very similar things under the heading of somebody has to win it.
We'll get there. Yeah, I think that one of the more interesting kind of subplots when we talk about players, and I think quarterbacks specifically, truly is nature versus nurture. And I don't know that there is a stronger argument for nurture, for the environment necessary to be successful, than Baker Mayfield. Because to your point, he has popped around all over the place, and he's had spurts of, it's like, okay, I see that this is that guy who won the Heisman, that guy who went number 1 overall, that guy who had players at the combine following him around like the Pied Piper. And then he just would go in the tank and be awful. Awful in Cleveland after, a nice start. Awful in Carolina. Then he goes to the Rams for like 3 weeks. Get him under Sean McVay. He looks good. Goes to the Bucs. Healthy situation. He's good again. And then you're looking at, stay in the same state. You got a player like Trevor Lawrence, who was as can't miss as you can be. And that guy has been in the worst organizational dysfunction to start a career, probably of any starting quarterback currently in the league right now. And he is still really, really struggling. How many quarterbacks out there are good enough to just throw them in a bad situation? Like I would say Joe Burrow was put into with the Bengals in terms of how that franchise is run, and really be able to elevate them.
So I think that gets a great big old it depends, because we are giving Joe Burrow a lot of culture changing credit. And I can't tell how much of that is correlation and causation, which is to say, he showed up in Cincinnati with the best thing that was going for him when he was at LSU, which was Jamar Chase. He did not come alone. He showed up with a dude who had hit the ground running as good as advertised, where T. Higgins is your number 2, right? And comfortably your number 2.
No question.
And will be somebody's number 1 in all likelihood next year. Mm-hmm. Right. So I can never tell how much of that is about Burrow, where Burrow, like the Bengals, I thought he should have tried to kick and scream and get himself elsewhere. So I agree with you that it was a bad situation, but I can't tell how much of that is the talent overcoming the badness of what was there. But to answer your question, very few, if any, guys can show up. Like Michael Vick did it in Atlanta when he first got there. Now, granted, they changed over ownership, but they were still the Falcons. The Ghosts were still running around that bad boy. Drew Brees did it in New Orleans. And I think we're seeing with Sean Payton that a lot of what we thought was the genius of Sean Payton was actually a brilliance in Drew Brees that we didn't give enough credit for existing in the first place. But no, you're asking for a lot, no matter who it is, for you to drop a guy off in a place and just be like, okay, go get it done, and nothing else around them matters.
Is coaching the biggest market inefficiency in the NFL right now?
Is it coaching or is it kind of infrastructure stuff, right? Because I do think coaching
I want to explore that.
Yeah, I think coaching is a big part of it, but there's like an interesting inflection concavity thing though that goes on with coaching, right? Because one thing I think that's happening is interesting is we're seeing the prevalence of the Shanahan-McVay tree kind of go around. And it works. But one of the problems with it is it works so well that these guys basically believe if you just do what I tell you to do, we can win anything. And that doesn't work, right? You need a guy that can exceed the scheme or do more than the scheme provides for you. But all of those guys believe that a dude like Kirk Cousins is the prototype for what they do because they think that that guy can do what the scheme calls for. It's how J.J. McCarthy winds up being, I believe it was the 10th, 11th, 12th, somewhere picking the draft. That's and right. It's just the idea that you'll do these things that my scheme requires. So you look at these guys that have the Shanahan, Kubiak, McVay guys, and they're like, okay, they've got this strategic advantage. We've seen what it's done to the Cowboys who are bad at stopping that scheme. But it then, I think, also winds up creating a hindrance for these dudes because you're just looking for somebody who can do the thing that you need done for the scheme. The ones that are winning out are like Houston, where they take the scheme and then they put C.J. Stroud in it, and now we've got all the bases covered for you. Like, oh, okay, now we're cooking with gas.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There was an interview a few years back with Joe Thomas, who was the, left tackle for a long time with 49ers. And he was asked about the Shanahan.
No, Thomas or Staley?
Staley, sorry.
There we go.
Thank you, Joe Staley.
Easy mistake. Not blaming you. I just wanted to make sure that they do that for the people at home.
Yeah. Real-time fact-checking here. And he was saying that, the thing about Shanahan is he makes it binary. It's just ones and zeros. You're looking for a specific key on the other side of the ball. And if they do X, you're doing 1. If they do Y, you're doing 0. And he said once you really internalize that, it makes it so free. You don't have to think as much when you're out there. But there's limitations to that. And to me, it's the difference between baking and cooking. Like, if you're baking, you got to follow that recipe. Everything has to be exactly as prescribed in order for it to turn out the way that you want to. And I think what you're talking about, and I agree with, is you need a quarterback that can cook and that can go outside the line sometimes and add spice where they see fit and make it work.
Man, I am stealing that.
It's yours.
That is an amazing analogy. Like, I think I'm pretty good in this analogy game. That one right there was extra strong, but it's the truth. Like, the West Coast offense, that is also a thing that Bill Walsh basically felt like one point of contention between he and Montana was his belief that you could just go get somebody else and drop them in, and then they could go do it as long as you just execute the scheme. But by the same token, when Walsh was given the opportunity to get Steve Young, he did it because there was a recognition of what could be if the guy could do something that was outside of your scheme. Like, as the coach, you have to have the humility to understand this. This is what happened with Sean McVay, where he looked up and realized that treating Jared Goff as his Frankenstein was probably not going to get them as far as bringing in Stafford.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the perfect example to use for that, because Goff got them there, right? And then 2 weeks of Belichick preparing for you, 3 points, highest scoring team in the NFL, 3 points in the Super Bowl. Very, very obvious limitations. And I truly, that's like my favorite trade that has happened in the NFL in a long time, because both teams, both fan bases, I think, are happy with it. And it feels like there's still good vibes between Rams fans and Jared Goff, still good vibes between Lions fans and Matthew Stafford. It seems like an impossible thing to pull off, and it's been really, really cool to watch that one play out. I want to keep this moving. Next up, I think, is maybe the most interesting team in the NFL right now, Chicago Bears. it's looking more and more like Caleb Williams is the real deal. Do you think they have the pieces there to make noise this year, or is it still 2025 and beyond for them?
I mean, they can make a little noise, but I feel like they're going to be more of a nuisance than like a disruptive factor. And it's just because I don't think they can block, right? Like if they can't protect him, then they're going to wind up with their issues. Like we're doing this after they got to go play Jacksonville. And let's be honest, if that was Jacksonville's second game in London and not their first, they probably would fire the coach. Like that was the kind of game where the coach gets fired when you go play that overseas or on national television. And lucky for him, he gets to play the Patriots. So he can save his job, or he can like solidly get himself fired.
Yes.
But yes, Caleb Williams looks to be that guy. I am skeptical of quarterbacks under 6'2". He is about 6'1". That's my giant concern as it relates to him. But he's that guy. Like, I'm not sure like what the ceiling is going to be full on his play. But when you talk about, do we got that guy? Oh, you have that guy, right? Now we're just going to see what the ceiling is on the talent. But as the guy, you got the guy.
Yeah, and it's not a one-to-one comparison, but I feel like there's a lot of similarities with Caleb Williams coming in to Chicago, which has been another moribund franchise for a long time, like the Bengals were, but he didn't show up alone. They brought in DJ Moore and Keenan Allen, like some real, there's a little bit of T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd action there in terms not only how each of those guys went on the field, but just having been there, having done it. And then he gets to come in with Rome Odunze, who I think is going to be very good. I'm not saying that he's Jamar Chase. I think there's maybe 5 people on the planet who you can put in that conversation, but it does feel like a similar framework for them continuing their ascent and not just being a flash.
Yeah, no, this is going to be fun to watch. It's the idea that your franchise has never had a good quarterback is amazing. I mean, no matter who we're talking about here, I guess Bobby Lane was there as Bobby Lane. Detroit was Bobby Lane played for them and Detroit, or Bobby Lane played for Detroit and Pittsburgh.
I don't know if he played for Chicago.
Sid Luckman, that's theirs. It's Sid Luckman. I had to remember which one it was. Right? It's Sid Luckman. How I can't imagine being like 60 years old. I've never seen my quarterback have a good team. Like, you could bounce around the league and take a team like the Cardinals, right? Where, like, even if you didn't have that 1 year of Carson Palmer, you've had Neil Lomax, or you've had Jim Hart, or like, and we can go all around.
Kurt Everybody's Warner. He almost won a Super Bowl, Kurt Warner.
Right. Everybody's had a little bit of a somebody, right?
Yep.
Not you ever. That's bananas.
Yeah, there's water in the desert for those guys, man. I imagine, it's fun having watched the Seahawks go from being a terrible Jim Mora coach team to the excitement of Pete Carroll and then Russell Wilson, and of course, Legion of Boom and all this stuff. Once they reached the top of the mountain, it changed a little bit. Like the vibe of being a fan changed. It went from hope to expectation. And I think you do lose a little bit when that happens. And I'm thinking about these Bears fans, and if they can make that climb. Man, that 2012 through 2014 run for the Seahawks, where they just kept getting better and better and better and more exciting, was so fun. So I'm excited for Bears fans. I hope that happens for them, because I always say on the show, I'm a football fan first, a Seahawks fan second, and as a fan of the NFL, it would just be awesome to see Caleb Williams take flight over there.
No, this is good for them. Yep. That is what I will say is good for them. Because, see, the thing with the Bears, too, is since not just do they have the same uniforms as always, it's those uniforms. Like, I can imagine how it just feels like Groundhog Day in the worst way.
Yeah, they never went for the rebrand.
No, let me tell you, the funniest thing ever. I remember this. This is probably 30 years ago. Sometimes you just remember something that you saw on TV 30 years ago.
Yeah.
They had a receiver. I want to say his name was Anthony Morgan, and he went to Tennessee. And forgive me, I feel like I'm older than everybody on the call, so I feel like I need to point this out. That back before they changed all the ways they did things with scholarships, one of the great ways the football teams would get over was by giving dudes track scholarships and then bringing them on the football team. And so Tennessee always had the best receivers in the country because they had the best track program in the country. So they'd always have a Willie Gault, Carl Pickens, all these dudes. And they had this one dude named Anthony Morgan, and he was super fast. And I remember on SportsCenter, I forget, it may have been Jack Edwards, I forget which one of the guys it was, and he caught the ball and he was running, and the guy was like, I understand that nobody looks fast in those jerseys, but that guy is moving. And that is what I will always remember about the Bears. It never feels like they're going
watching
fast.
The Titans.
It never feels
Nobody
like they're
looks
going
athletic
fast.
in the Titans. Man, Derrick Henry out there being one of the greatest running backs of all time. You put him in that Ravens purple, he looks like a totally different player.
Dude, so I grew up in Houston. So like Titans uniforms or the Oilers uniforms to me. And I admit that it took me so long after we moved there when I was 7 years old to rationalize the idea of playing football in that color. It just didn't make any sense to me. And they had a lunatic squad too. Yeah. It just didn't add up. Like I loved it. Like when Tampa had the creamsicle joints. As a kid, I was like, why are you playing football in those? I guess they wasn't really playing football because they stunk.
Yep. No, I mean it's the Bears have held the line. It would be awesome to see them get over. Now the next team got close, and now they feel a little bit no man's land. I feel like the talent is still there for them to make a deep run. Tell me how you feel about the Eagles.
I mean, they've got to fire the coach.
He is a donkey, man.
It's just so. I've lost my job a few times in various places, various ways for various reasons, okay? Like, I have no problem admitting this thing because just about everybody I know that's worth a damn been fired before. One of y'all done probably got fired before. Y'all just don't talk about it as much. I got a different level of self-confidence than most people do. Like, this is, I'm kind of joking in the presentation, but I really mean this. And I think it's important to note, though, that, like, sometimes you lose your job because it just ain't right now, right? Like every time a coach gets fired, somebody points it out and they're like, oh, you're acting like it's his fault that ... No. Your team can win the Super Bowl and somebody involved is going to lose their job. You're not saying that person is the reason for anything wrong necessarily as much as, hey, man, we can get better by changing this thing, right? However, in this case, he is the problem, or at the very least, a significant problem. And to me, it is this simple. If you are going to be in charge, you have to at least present yourself as a serious person. Mm-hmm. And he, from day one, has presented himself as an unserious person. And as a result, it seems from the quarterback on down, a quarterback that people respect, they do not take this man seriously.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any way that they can pull this together with a leader that nobody takes seriously.
Well, yeah, and so that's a dynamic that I want to explore a little bit because I'm a big Jalen Hurts guy, and from what I can tell, he commands the kind of respect you want your franchise quarterback to command within the locker room. He's that ace, and there's clear friction between him and the head coach. And a lot of times, I might say, you know what, the quarterback and the head coach, they got to get on the same page. But I think Sirianni got carried to a Super Bowl by an extremely talented roster. I think Howie Roseman obviously has done a phenomenal job putting that squad together. And then he had Shane Steichen and Jonathan Gannon, who were exceptional at their jobs. They leave. They carry the momentum to a 10-1 start and completely tank. Feel like they haven't recovered. Now, they brought in a couple of accomplished coordinators, but he's not calling plays. Big Dom is the he's the game management coordinator. Like, what is it that Nick Sirianni even does except for give bad pressers?
Yo, am I the only person that wants footage of his interview?
Seriously.
Because it seems impossible it seems impossible. Even if you think he's a good coach, no matter what you think about him positive, okay, it is hard to believe that he sat down through a legitimate interview process and was the most impressive person that they talked to, given how unimpressive he is every time he talks.
Well, and that was a desirable job, too. It's not like the Commanders getting turned down by everybody and then, giving it to somebody who's happy to have the job. Like, the Eagles' job was choice.
Yeah. No, they have players, man. Yeah. Like, that offense should be the best offense in the league. One would think. With those two receivers, with Saquon Barkley, with a quarterback that I don't know how good he is, right? But I think that we're going to have to stop thinking of him in the context of his salary because I think they're paying him $50 million a year. Well, now Dak Prescott makes $60 million a year, and that means that Jalen Hurts is probably appropriately priced at $50 million a year. Like, as that whole market resets, he's going to be at a number that's probably close to the middle, and he's probably a close to the middle sort of quarterback.
Yeah.
But they got they got enough players to do this.
Yeah.
I can't believe that they look the way that they look, because the Browns have the worst quarterback situation in the history of the NFL, and they almost won that game.
Yep. All right. So last two teams here on Contenders and Pretenders are the two teams Seattle finds themselves sandwiched in between on their schedule. You got the 49ers who whipped their ass on Thursday, and you got the Falcons coming up. I want to start with the 49ers because, again, look, we speak through the prism of our experience, and my NFL experience is colored by being a Seahawks fan, and the 49ers remind me a lot of the 2015 Seahawks team that lost a heartbreaking Super Bowl. Unlike the 49ers, they at least won one the year before. But after that, you just saw fissures in the foundation. You saw things start to crack with the Seahawks, and they had enough talent, and the coaching was good enough for them to still win games and still make the playoffs. But it was clear that they were not the same, and it could be bad vibes from heartbreaking loss, which the 49ers have had 4 heartbreaking season-ending losses in the last 5 years. It's also just these guys are all getting paid now. It happened with Seattle. They were doing this with all these Hall of Famers on rookie contracts. Then they started to get paid, and it makes it hard to find new talent when you don't have the money to do it. Also, this is 5 straight years of really short off seasons for the 49ers. Is this a team that you see getting it together, winning the division, making another deep playoff run, or are we starting to see the beginning of the end of this iteration?
Well, also a team that's always really banged up.
Yep.
And they seem to be really banged up again this year. I am inclined to say contender, but the pretender vibes, like whatever, the rising and falling moons, whatever they be talking about, all that woo-woo shit,
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like one of the moons is going, I feel like they're dealing with a very similar situation to that. And I think a better comparison may be, rather than those 2015 Seahawks, is it possible it's the 2014 49ers? Now, that team was marked by our understanding of the chaos with Harbaugh and Trent Baalke and everything that was going on front office-wise and everything else, right? So, we knew that stuff. But that was a team that suffered a heartbreaking loss the year before. That's the crazy Richard Sherman interception interview combination that we will all remember. And the 49ers came back in the midst of that. Maybe that's part of what's going on here. And you're right, these guys getting paid. With the Seahawks, for example, between the 2010 and 2011 draft, what did they do? What did they draft? At least 2 Hall of Famers? Get to 2012 and 13, the whole run. But they had that 2011 draft, I feel like, is the one where they took Sherman, Chancellor, and maybe somebody else. They had Earl Thomas in the 2010 draft. But all these guys were together, right? They all started at the same time, and then they all got money and got paid at the same time.
Yeah, you had Baldwin and KJ Wright, and then Wagner and Wilson the following year. And they got Michael Bennett and Cliff Averill cheap in free agency. They had to get paid. Yep.
Yes, right. All this is happening at the same time with the all that came together in the way that it did for the Seahawks. With the 49ers, they got a lot of dudes whose turn it was to get paid, on top of the fact that the Trey Lance bill is going to come due.
Man.
And it seems that this is the point at which it comes due. It happened with the Rams, right?
Yes.
F them picks all of a sudden turned into, wow, our roster is incredibly thin. And that's a point that it feels like the 49ers were going to be at. And they tried to account for that, right? You could always bet one of your receivers is going to get hurt. They went and drafted B-Rad, the dude from Florida. He gives me he got a real Malibu Most Wanted kind of vibe off of him
Ricky
from draft night.
Oh, man, Slick Rick.
Oh, did you see the clip of him when they drafted him? And he gets off the phone, and I've never heard his voice, and he looks at the family and is like, hey, yo, we a 49er. And I was like, oh, boy, we got one of these.
Hey, you talk about a Bay Area fit culturally.
yes, right? Like I say, they got one of those. But I can't tell what's going to happen with them. Purdy appears to be, if nothing else, an NFL quarterback.
Yes.
And I wasn't always positive that was what he was.
Same.
You know?
Yeah, I agree. I think they are one of the most fascinating teams in the NFL right now. And, I once again fooled myself into thinking maybe the Seahawks will close that gap on them. Maybe by the time we get to the end of the year, 49ers regress a little bit. Seattle has developed a little bit, but man, that gap was disappointingly large still on Thursday. I want to move ahead to this upcoming week, and the last contender pretender on the list the Atlanta Falcons. Seattle heading to Georgia on Sunday. 4-2 Falcons, 3-3 Seahawks. Talk to me about this game. Talk to me what you see with these two teams.
Falcons are always pretending. Like you can just take that with you to the bank, no matter what it is, no matter how it spans, man. The Falcons are always pretending.
Is that Arthur Blank on down, or what's the deal there?
No, it's in the DNA of the franchise. Arthur Blank's the best thing that ever happened to that ragtag outfit. Like, that's the only reason that we even asked the question is whether or not they could possibly be contenders is because of the work that Arthur Blank has done with that team. People were mad at him for, doing the Ring of Honor thing for himself. He would like to attend. Okay, right? like, forgive the man for wanting to be there for the time he gets into the Ring of Honor. Okay, he wanted to be there and he deserved it because that franchise has sold out the house every day now for almost 25 years, and it's because of what he did. Anyway, I used to root for the Falcons, so you can hear this in a lot of what I'm talking about. You dig? I just don't think that a one-legged quarterback who is best operating off of play action and doesn't appear physically to really be able to do that anymore is going to be able to get you to where you need to go. They've got the weapons. I understand why they made the decision to go with Kirk when they did it, but people act like cats don't get old anymore and that like the Achilles injury is still not an Achilles injury. I just don't think, he can have those games where he puts up those big numbers, but he's also a panicker. Yep. And so now he a panicker with one leg. No.
Yeah, man. No, absolutely. He's a baker, not a chef. And he's one of those quarterbacks where I feel like pressure is as important against Kirk Cousins as it is against any quarterback. Every quarterback's worse when they're pressured, but Kirk Cousins especially so. I don't know that Seattle has the guys right now, especially with Byron Murphy and Uchenna Nwosu hurt, to put the type of pressure on them to keep the Falcons under 30, 34 points, which I think is what it's going to take. You know what I'm saying? They're just not there.
That's what it comes to. That's what it comes to, right?
Yeah. And McDonald will hopefully get them there, right? They supposedly hired the Sean McVay of defense, but it's going to take some time. And at some point, you need the dudes.
Yeah. And then it's just going to be like, how many points can Geno put up for you? And the answer is probably 20-something.
Yeah, they're moving the ball. They're scoring. He's leading the NFL in passing. They're moving the ball, but they're not stopping anybody with a real quarterback right now. And at the very least, Kirk Cousins is a real quarterback. When you look at this Seahawks team, how far away do they feel? Do they feel like they're moving in the right direction post Pete Carroll?
I would say yes, right? And so, what it feels like happened with Pete is that it just got a little bit stale.
Yep.
Like what he did, there's some guys who can run the same defense forever and never have to change it. Wade Phillips was running the same defense for 40 years, right? And what happens is at every stop, they get a little bored with how static the thing was. And then there's somebody else for which it's new. They're like, wow, it's a one gap 3-4. And then you come in and you feel good about it. So happened with Wade at the Rams, right? It goes. And with Pete, the scheme got a little bit stale. I don't have the greatest handle, though, on just how talented the team is. Right. I think somebody's going to, at some point, we're going to raise a question about just how good Geno is. And I think that Geno has proven himself to be very good. Mm-hmm. And what happens when you have a team where your quarterback maybe is actually a little better than you realize, and maybe you should have leaned in a little bit more into the urgency of the moment of the time that you had this quarterback? Because it's going to be hard to get a quarterback better than Geno, but Geno's not young, so I don't know how long he's going to wind up being in this place. But I ask you guys there, do you think that the overall talent level is there? Because when you start ask somebody to start calling out names of the Seahawks, it ain't that easy.
Sure. Yeah, I think, you've got the guys that get your dick hard when you're playing fantasy football, like DK Metcalf and Ken Walker. People know Jacson Smith and Jigba. He's starting to round into shape. Tyler Lockett's kind of always been there. He's a lot like kind of Tyler Boyd. He's just always been there, always been good. But yeah, after that, you look on the defense, there's players we like as Seahawks fans. I think Devin Witherspoon could be a star. But other than that, it's piecing together role players. They got a ton of guys that are on one-year contracts. And coming into this season, Mike and I talked a lot about how this felt like a tryout year for Mike Macdonald, where he's got a bunch of guys on this defense that are auditioning for a future with the Seahawks, because there's very few guys under contract in a meaningful way beyond this year on the defensive side of the ball. But I think also, so, my main gig, I'm a realtor. And one of the things that I talk to sellers about is, and I say this just because I'm acknowledging that I might be a little bit too close to the flame here, but there's a difference in how you live in your home and how you sell your home. And it's okay to live how you want to live, but when you're going to sell that joint, people are coming in with fresh eyes and they're going to notice things that you don't, like a broken piece of trim somewhere that you don't notice because you've had a dresser in front of it and, whatever, or the bathroom fan that doesn't work. It stopped working 4 years ago. You don't even think about it anymore, right? But someone coming in, fresh eyes, they look at that and they say, oh, okay, that's what's wrong with it. So, yeah, I want to apply that same concept to you coming in, fresh eyes, looking at this home that we've been living in, and say, and I want to talk about two players specifically. We'll start with the quarterback. Geno Smith, if you're the 49ers, so he's technically under contract for the next year, but he's already making noise about wanting this new contract. I was thinking you could probably, coming into this year, if they had signed him, get him in that $35 to $40 million a year range on a 3-year contract, give him 80, 90, maybe $100 million guaranteed, and keep him in that, start him out in that 10 to 15 range of salary, and then watch other people pass him as these guys keep getting these big contracts. I don't think you're going to be able to do that anymore, especially if he goes out and leads the league in passing. So if you're the Seahawks, are you looking at Geno Smith as someone that you could pay $45 or more million a year to, or do you try and reset?
I just saw somebody pay Kirk Cousins on one leg $40 million a year, and they seem happy about it. I would try to lock this in with Geno as quickly as I could.
I am right there with you.
To me, it's a no-brainer. And look, I understand the skepticism that people had about, is this thing for real? But the idea that people are still doing this in year 3 just sounds a little bit like schism. Like there's no other way for me to look at this. Yeah. What more does he need to do? What more does he need to demonstrate for you? And this ain't smoke and mirrors. No. I mean, when you watch it, he's back there slanging it. He's back there in full control of what's going on. Like he plays with a clear and obvious confidence of what's going on. And yes, they've got some good receivers for him to throw to, but these aren't the 49ers, right? Nope. His success is not a function of surroundings as much as it is a function of himself. Yep. He's not by himself, but he's doing it.
And he's been doing it with an insane pressure rate too. I mean, it's not like this guy is operating from a clean pocket. Hardly ever. I mean, he is navigating chaos and still keeping the eyes downfield, making second and third level tight window throws. He's got the balls to run the type of offense that most teams want their quarterbacks to be able to do. But in the same way that, personal trainers want to work with elite athletes so they can do all the cool stuff that they've learned, most of the time they're working with people who are out of shape trying to get into shape. And so you're just doing the basics with them. And I feel like with Geno Smith, you have an elite athlete where you can do the cool training stuff with. And I think when you have that, you lean in, and I'm with you. I say lock him up as quick as you can, because I don't know. It's easy to say, oh, no, you can do better. How? Where's that guy coming from?
That's what I'm saying. Look, if you want to do better, all right, let's say this. If you want to do basically what the Falcons wound up doing, because I didn't think drafting Penix was nearly as bad an idea as other people make it out to be.
Same.
But if you want to do the idea of, I've got a high-priced bridge, and then we're going to draft somebody else behind them, okay, knock yourself out. Go ahead and do that. But what people need to look up and realize is that there was a period of time for almost 15 years where this country stopped producing quarterbacks. From 2005 through, I'll call it 2016. Like when you get to 2017, it gets to be a little bit different. But when you start going year by year in those drafts and you start looking at who stuck around for a long time, who hung, who lasted, those numbers are short, right? Those numbers aren't great. What that is to say is there aren't a lot of guys in their late 20s and early 30s that you can just plug in as a short-term solution. The league just doesn't have them, okay? Yep. Geno Smith is one of those guys that you would have thought of as maybe being that bridge, except no, he proved himself to be an actual real live starter. Outside of that, you're not getting anybody young that can do the job because somebody's going to hold on to that. Well, so what are you going to do? Go draft somebody? Are you noticing how long it's taking the young guys to actually get up to speed now?
Well, and we're seeing projects going in the top 10 every single year. And Seattle, they may not be there yet, but they're not drafting in the top 5 this year. And I don't know, there's a quarterback coming out this year that even if you want to turn it over to. So the other thing that I would say, last thought on Geno is, yes, he's older. Yes, he's in his 30s, and that comes with a little bit of a stigma. But we've seen for the last 10 years really good quarterbacks be able to play well into the 30s. Also, it's not like Geno has the mileage on him.
Correct.
That a lot of these older quarterbacks have. He hasn't started that many games. He's got the actual on-field mileage of a quarterback in their mid-20s right now. So I think at least theoretically, there's an idea that you've got a little bit longer time frame with Geno than other quarterbacks at his age.
Yeah, look, if you're the Seahawks and you can get a guy like, just throwing it out there, call it Cam Ward, mid to late first round this year, second round, yeah, give it a try. Because what Geno Smith proves to you is something that gets lost. You can, in fact, get better by not playing.
Yeah. I mean,
at some point, people are going to have to realize, as counterintuitive as that sounds, what's most important about playing football is right here, the ability to see it and do it quickly with the smallest lag between the recognition and the recognition, decision, and action, right? Yep. You minimize the lags between those things. That's where this quarterbacking thing happens, and that can happen from watching.
I mean, it's such a hard thing to do as a franchise, but there's only one organization that hasn't had to worry about their quarterback in 30 years. That's the Green Bay Packers.
Amazing.
They drafted Aaron Rodgers in the first round, sat him for 3 years behind a good quarterback. They drafted Jordan Love in the first round, sat him for 3 years behind a good quarterback. And you know what? When the time came, those dudes were ready, and they took control and they ran with it. And I think Geno is at least good enough that if you wanted to take that approach, you could. I don't think you just draft a quarterback and sit him behind dysfunction for 3 years.
Right.
But if you've got a good quarterback to learn from and see the practice habits and how they devour a playbook, then yeah, I'm on board with that. And it's tough because, we talked about marketing efficiencies with coaching earlier. It's just out there. It's a part of the discussion now that the biggest marketing efficiency from a player standpoint is a franchise quarterback on a rookie contract. That's what everybody wants. But that is so much harder to do than you think. There are so many more washouts than, a Patrick Mahomes or a Russell Wilson, where they come out and they're setting the league on fire and you're hardly paying him anything. Brock Purdy, right? I mean, how much does that landscape change when he gets a $50 million a year raise? So yeah, I'm with you. I'm fine with draft and develop, but I think you got to keep Geno. The last question I have for you, this is someone, he's a player, you already know who I'm talking about. He's going to be a firebrand no matter what. Somehow, not to ask a leading question, somehow our fan base is still torn on DK Metcalf. What is your perspective of him as a player, as someone that you keep as a cornerstone piece of your franchise moving forward?
I feel like with Metcalf, it's the blessing and curse of that body.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like being that big and that fast, it's hard for people to be satisfied with what you do because you always feel like he could be doing more. I think that he's a guy that kind of exists in that space. But at the same time, I think that he is in the world of good to potentially very good, but not great.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that if he looked differently, people would be a little bit more okay with that. That being said, he's probably going to have like 1,500 yards receiving.
I know. I know. I say this all the time. People talk about the meat that's left on the bone with DK Metcalf because you see the flashes, you see the 150-yard, 2-touchdown games, and you say, why don't you do that all the time? First of all, man, in order for receivers to put up, unless you're Justin Jefferson, in order for receivers to get theirs, a lot of other stuff has to be going right. And you just look at, if you remove names and, to your point, bodies from the equation, and you just looked at resume and what DK Metcalf has done in his first 5 years, you're taking that 10 times out of 10 and you're saying, lock this dude up. But he is big on the field. He's big off the field. I think there is real value in having a cool player on your team. And DK Metcalf is a very cool player. That's what keeps young fans engaged. It's what helps you sell jerseys outside of your market. DK Metcalf is cool, right? He's doing the celebrity softball and basketball games. He's out there on commercials. He looks awesome, man. He's the coolest looking dude in the NFL. And you're right. With that comes extra expectations, but he is on pace for 1,500 yards this year. So I don't know. To me, it seems like a no-brainer, but you know how fans are.
But he's also, look, man, a guy that's bigger and faster than anybody across from him is always going to have value as a wide receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Always will. You got to pay attention to that guy. Yeah, you got to pay attention to that guy.
Yeah, exactly. He's not only getting shadowed, they're shading safeties, and that opens things up everywhere else. Yes. It's not to put him on the same caliber, but it's similar to what Steph Curry did for that Warriors offense beyond just the scoring. It's, well, shit, man, now I got to guard this guy 30 feet away from the basket. That creates so much more space.
Keep your eye on him. That's what it is. Keep your eye on him.
That's right. We had Michael Sean Dugar, who does a phenomenal job covering the team for The Athletic, on, and he was like, just watch. Like, if you're at the games, just watch the defenses. There is no question that the number one bullet point all week was number 14.
Thank you for saying Dugar, by the way. I was actually wondering the other day. I was like, damn, I've met Mike, but I can't remember how to say his last name. You saved me for the next time that I see him.
Yeah, he's the best, man. All right, last question before we get out of here. And, man, super thankful for your time today. I just want to get quick prediction from you. Now, you got to, in this hypothetical, you got to bet $10,000 of your own money right now. But if you get all of this right, you get $1 million coming back. Who beats who in the Super Bowl? Who wins MVP?
Until about literally 48 hours ago, I was going Ravens-Lions with my Lions. I've adopted the Lions. Yep. With my Lions winning the Super Bowl, and then Aiden Hutchinson broke his leg off.
I know.
And that, but I tell you this, after seeing Devontae Adams get traded, that leads me to believe that Max Crosby has to be for sale. Ooh. And I think Dan Campbell and Max Crosby, that feels like that was ordained by the stars. And if they do get him, then I'm going right back to the Lions as my team. That, and I realize that picking the Lions to win the Super Bowl seems like a foolhardy mission, but that was what they did to the Cowboys is the most disrespectful thing I've seen in a very, very, very long time.
It was gorgeous, man.
They were throwing back shoulder passes to the tackle eligible.
Yeah, they got Penei Sewell out there on a hook and ladder, man. I mean, it was just like, who wants a touchdown? I love it, man. I love fuck you football. And the Detroit Lions are playing fuck you football right now. All right, so that said, they don't have Max Crosby right now. Are you sticking with him?
I mean, I don't have nobody else. Like that's the thing about the NFC. Whoever your team is that you pick, if somebody says not them, you're like, oh boy, it's got really tough really fast. Like, what am I supposed to do? The teams in the league with the 4 best point differentials are all in the NFC North.
Isn't that wild?
That is a crazy number.
That is insane. All right, so we got Lions over Ravens. Who's your MVP? Got to cast your vote right now.
Super Bowl MVP?
Nope. NFL MVP.
NFL MVP. I actually think it's going to be Lamar Jackson again.
And see here, I wanted us to have something to argue about at the end. I got Ravens over Lions in the Super Bowl. Yeah. I had that before the season. I have it now. And until really this last week, probably, I still had Josh Allen as my MVP. Not that he did anything last night to dissuade me from that. I mean, the guy is the knock with Josh Allen is he can do everything, but doesn't turn the ball over. He ain't turning the ball over this year at all. And
he's trying though.
He's trying. Man. He's doing his best. He's still trying. He's doing his best, but he just can't seem to pull it off. But I mean,
that's how you know he throw the ball hard as hell, man. Oh, man. You got to know it's coming.
But you know what? You look at who he's throwing the ball to, and it's a bunch of toddlers out there. Guys who are learning the NFL game, and he's still doing his thing. So yeah, really, really impressed with him. But I'm with you. What Lamar is unlocking, what Derrick Henry is helping him unlock, because it's not like Lamar is throwing to the Bengals receivers right now.
Right.
You know? I mean, he's got the ghost of Mark Andrews.
They got decent receivers.
Decent. I like Zay Flowers.
Yeah, there was a time where Zay Flowers was great to have as your third down slot guy.
Absolutely.
You didn't think about him as being like the number one receiver.
Yeah.
Like the ghost of Mark Andrews likely is good to have as your second tight end, right?
He's
I think they have a lot of guys.
Yeah, he's a matchup dependent kind of guy. There's defenses he is uniquely equipped to beat, and then there's other games where it's just he's going to be a 0 on the scorecard.
Yes.
Yeah, man. I'm with you. I think it's Lamar right now. Wow, my vote would be TJ Watt, but he ain't going to win it. So if I'm betting,
quarterback award.
Yeah, it's Lamar. All right, listen, Bomani, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for you joining us this morning. You gave me an excuse to smoke a breakfast cigar. Thank you for that.
No, I appreciate it. And I want to tell you something funny. When I got the email about doing the show, there's a picture of you in the email, and I was looking at it, and my immediate thought was, is this motherfucker trying to sell me a house? Like, what is going on with this picture? And then I got down farther and was like, oh, okay. He actually is trying to sell me a house. Got you. It's like when you said the day job is real estate, I was immediately wondering, because I was like, and so then it got to the question of, why do people only look like that in pictures if they're trying to sell you a house? It's not that it's a bad picture. I just immediately recognize you as somebody trying to sell me a house or trying to buy my house. You ever thought about selling a house?
Yeah. I know. A little cliche, but I think it's also because we're one of the few professions that pay for professional photography.
Fair. Like, wasn't even mad at you. It wasn't even judgment. It was just so funny to me because I was saying it as a joke. And then I got to it. It was like, no, he's actually trying to sell you a house.
Yeah, selling houses and looking for excuses to talk ball with people who know it better than me. So thank you for giving me that chance.
No, man, I appreciate you, man. It's been a good time.
Yeah. Well, we'd love to do it again. And listen, most people who are listening and watching this know already. But before we let you go, tell the folks where they can get more of you.
All right, check me out. I host a podcast called The Right Time with Bomani Jones. You can get us where all fine podcasts are given away for free. We also do a lot of YouTube exclusive content, and that can be quick reaction type stuff. Also, we're doing like a concert diary series right now. So our next entry, by the time people see this, got one on Stevie Wonder live in Madison Square Garden last week. Check that out. I'll have another one. I'm going to see Sturgill Simpson on the 19th at Forest Hills. So we'll do something about that. We did a series on the best rap albums of the year 1994. So we keep a lot of different stuff spinning around there that's not just about the sports. So come over and check us out.
As always, you can find Mike and I on social media. I am on Twitter at Jacson Bevins. That's Jacson. Remember that no K is okay when spelling my name. Mike is on Twitter at Mike Barwin, and the show itself is at Cigar Thoughts. You can catch full video episodes on our YouTube channel at Cigar Thoughts and find the rest of our socials at cigarthoughtsnfl.com. As mentioned previously, this episode is brought to you by Glenfiddich Premium Single Malt Scotch Whiskey. Y'all know I'm a huge fan of their lineup. We are thrilled to have them on board as a sponsor of the show. And one of the great things about a great Scotch is how well it plays with a good cigar. So once again, we do have our own special release of cigars that you can purchase at a terrific price as a listener of the show. The release of these Cigar Thoughts Stogies has been successful enough for us to continue offering them for the low price of $149. That's right, just $149 for a bundle of 10. As many of you know, we partner with one of the most prestigious cigar manufacturers in the world to release these official Cigar Thoughts cigars, which you can order directly from cigarthoughtsnfl.com. Or you can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram and we'll send you the details directly. The cigars come with the Bovita humidification pack and a Mylar storage bag to make sure they stay fresh, whether you have a humidor or not. And of course, you can listen to this show and read every article at fieldgoals.com. And if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and you like the show, drop us a 5-star rating and leave a quick review. I cannot stress enough how much this helps. I mean, just real talk. We are trying to make this thing work, and those reviews and those ratings, they help the algorithm, man. They help this show grow. So if you like it, hook it up, leave us the 5 stars. We'll keep it moving. Thank you to all of y'all listening for your continued support of the show. We know you've only got so much time for podcasts in your life, and it is an honor to be a part of that for y'all. Please know that by sharing the show on social media and with your friends, you give us the juice to keep making this happen. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, onwards and upwards, my friends.